Hey guys, I'm Victoria Pearson, but you can call me V, and this week I am speaking all about Preptober. I am planning for National Novel Writing Month, where I intend to write 50,000 words in 30 days. Join me in planning that so it doesn't become a complete mess. So, ever so quickly for those who don't know, Nanowrimo, which is short for National Novel Writing Month, is a time in November when a bunch of writers get together and each write at least 50,000 words, a short novel, in 30 days. Yeah, I know. Bit of an ask, right? I've done Nanowrimo a few times now, 4 or 5 times. The times that I've finished, those have been the times where I've planned out what I'm going to do in advance. There are people that don't do that. There are people that just start with a blank page and no ideas whatsoever on November the 1st and see what happens. That would give me a nervous breakdown. I need to plan to be able to finish. Actually, each time that I've tried to Nanowrimo without a plan, what's usually happened is that about 25,000-30,000 words in, I just completely lose steam, realise that I don't know what the motivations are, I don't know where the story's going, and I don't know what I'm trying to tell people. And so, I do a really basic plan, very, very simple one that gives me lots of creative freedom within it, and that way, when I get up each morning in November, open the document that I'm using, I know what I need to get out next. And that is why I plan. If you are a seat in your pants kind of writer, you might not find this video massively useful, but you will find some of it will help you, especially the parts about clearing the decks, making sure that your time is honoured and valued, and making sure that everybody around you knows that for this month you are prioritising your writing. Now obviously this is just my way of doing things, and that does vary from time to time. There is no wrong way to do Nanowrimo. In fact, even if you only manage to write 5 words a day, if those are words that you wouldn't normally have written during this time, then well done, you won. It's all about creating that habit, building up those creative muscles, and in part about knowing that you actually can make time to write. So, I've got my coffee, I've got my big glass of water because I like to keep that in my eye line, otherwise I forget to drink. I'm basically a house plant, I will just dry up and die. And I have got, most importantly for this, my post-it notes. Now, this year on Nanowrimo, I'm doing things a little bit differently to how I usually do. I'm not doing a novel for one thing, I'm doing a script. And I'm not doing it by myself this year, I am collaborating with someone. So I'm still kind of feeling out how we're going to do that, what my process is going to be, all that sort of thing. And I'm not really sure how it's going to pan out now, because Nanowrimo really is about doing that, experimenting with your process, experimenting with your style, things like that. So it doesn't matter, it's 30 days of your life, you know. And so I'm going to show you actually how I planned the last Nanowrimo that I did, which I was really, really successful at. I ended up doing an 87, I think, 1,000 word novel, which was complete. And actually, although it was a dirty draft, because anything that you produce in 30 days is going to be a dirty draft that needs a lot of work doing to it, I'm actually really, really pleased with the story, how it all hangs together, and the fact that I managed to make a really complicated story, because I was doing a supernatural murder mystery thriller. I managed to get all of that complicated storyline down and making sense within the 30 days. That was a massive achievement for me. So I'm going to talk you through how I wrote that story rather than how I'm planning for this time, because I'm not even doing all my planning on my own. It's going to be a weird fusion of my style and Tix, my writing partner, his style, mesh it together, see what happens. No idea yet. I'll let you know after Nano. But for now, I'm going to show you how I planned last time in a way that actually worked for me. Okay, so full disclosure, I had intended on showing you the actual plan that I did for my last novel, but I can't find it. I'm sure it is somewhere safe. It's somewhere so safe that even I don't know where it is. It would have been a bit tatty anyway, so I'm just going to show you as if we've gone from scratch. So last time I used the base of an old drawer as my board. That's just because that's what I had in the shed. It was waiting to go to the tip, and I thought we'll give it a new lease of life. You don't have to use that. You can use a big bit of cardboard, you can use a bit of greaseproof paper or wrapping paper that you can roll up afterwards, anything you like, corkboard, whiteboard, whatever. Keep it somewhere that you can see it throughout November. That's why I like to put it up here, and then it will just give you that visual reminder to go and do some writing. I'm somebody that needs my visual reminders a lot. As you might be able to see, I've got my vitamins out so that I remember to take them. And like I said before, I've got my big glass of water so I don't just dry up like a houseplant, because I forget to drink when I'm hyper-focused in a piece of work. If you're planning on doing my kind of Preptober, you will need something to stick your post-its on. I can't be bothered to sort out a whole board just for this, because this isn't for the Preptober, I'm really Preptobering, and so I'm just going to get a notebook. This one actually I might end up using for Preptober because it was a gift from the person that I'm collaborating with, which is lovely. You will need some post-it notes, something to stick them on. That can be a notebook, it can be a board, whatever. A big bit of wall, it's only a post-it note, it's not going to do any harm. You will also obviously need a pen and some kind of idea of where we're going with this, but it doesn't have to be a massive idea. Now, the last novel that I did was a complicated one because, as I said, it was a supernatural murder mystery thriller, and so I needed clues there so that the reader, when they hit the big reveal of who the killer is, goes, oh yeah, that makes sense. But not so many that it becomes so obvious that the reader doesn't feel just a little bit clever for working it out. So for that reason, we also needed red herrings to be involved. That's clues that point to somebody else that is not the killer. And of course, like with any other story, I needed some character development arcs, I needed some subplot arcs, I needed things that all tied into the same theme. And once you start thinking about all of those things, it gets really, really overwhelming. You know me by now, I like to do things in tiny little easy steps. And so the first thing that I do before I start doing a novel is look up what the beat structure is. Now that means that if you're writing a supernatural thriller, there are certain expectations that an audience has of the book. It doesn't mean it has to be tropey and formulaic, but they expect certain things. I need an inciting incident no matter what kind of story I'm writing, because otherwise my characters are just going to sit at home watching telly and scrolling Twitter, and that isn't very interesting to watch. So I need something that strikes them to move into action. And then a little while after that, I'm going to need a pinch point. I'm going to need something that makes this character go, I am really getting annoyed with this antagonist now. Now it is personal. Let's go. When it comes to subplots as well, readers have certain expectations. They want all of the subplots to be resolved, maybe not as massively as the main storyline, that is your pure focus, but it's going to want some subplots that arch through the whole thing, that keep you interested, even if the main plot line is going a little bit slowly at that time. So I find structure a really great place to start with my novel planning, even if I already have other ideas in mind. Because once you've got that structure in place, you've got everything you need to hang your story on. Obviously, structure does depend on the genre that you're writing, and so not everything that I'm going to say in this one will fit for you, because I'm talking about my supernatural thriller murder mystery during this one, but you should be able to extrapolate from that and turn it into something that is going to be useful for you in your structure. You can just Google structure of a romance novel and you will find all sorts of tips for the different beats that you need to hit. That is the same whatever genre you are writing. So in some kind of thriller, it's usually a 3-act structure. A lot of stories are a 3-act structure because it's a nice, easy and simple way to tell a story that our brains react really, really well to. First thing you need is your hook. This is usually your main character. Who is this person? Let's meet them. Like, what's going to compel me to keep going through this story? What's going to bring me into this world? I just need a little glimpse of it. Maybe including the murder weapon, if you can, if this is that kind of story, because we do like to see that on page 1, even if we don't realise that we do. Then, after that, a little while later, I'm going to need an inciting incident. So, what I'm going to do, before I know what any of this is, I'm going to grab my post-it notes, I'm going to write hook on one, and I'm going to stick it onto my board right at the beginning, or if I'm doing it in a notebook on page 1. And then I'm going to write inciting incident on another of these post-its, and I'm going to stick that next too. Now, I don't know what those things are going to be yet, but once I've got them up on my board and I can see that, like, this is where I need the pinch point happening, this is where I need the climax happening, this is where I need the long dark night of the soul for this character, you know, this is where I need them to be completely abandoned by everyone and feeling like everything is hopeless just before they pull off the great big thing that's going to make everybody go, oh, I'm so glad that they managed it. Once I've got all of that down on my board, and I'm sure you can do that digitally as well, by the way, once I've got all that down on my board, it becomes a little bit easier to see where I need things to happen. For example, if I was writing Cinderella, okay, I might know that at some point I need her to meet her fairy godmother, but I'm not quite sure where in the story to do that. Once I've got the structure out and down, I can see that it's obviously the big inciting incident that gets her to go to the ball. Later on, her long dark night of the soul is when her stepsisters have destroyed the ball gown that she and her friends have spent ages making for her. She feels like there's absolutely no way she can go to the ball now. Just as she's having that awful moment of, it can't possibly go well for me, that's when we bring in the fairy godmother so she can go, tra-la, let me make your dreams come true, which is what we all expect from that story, yeah? Once I've got those structural points in place, I can always move around on my board. I can always say, well, I want that pinch point to happen before the inciting incident, or I want my first plot point to be right at the beginning as my big hook. That's fine. Like I said, NaNoWriMo is all about experimenting with your style. Once you've got that structure down in place, I'm pointing to a board that isn't here because I had planned for there to be a board here. Once you've got all that structure down in place, it's going to be a lot easier to work out what else you need to work out about your story. Once I've got all that structure in place, you might think that this is where I start planning out scenes, but it's not. This is where I need to know my characters really, really well. Because if I know those characters to the point where they are actual people, I will always know how that they're going to react in any different situation. For example, I know that my grandma, if she was in a particular situation, would handle it very, very differently to how my son might handle the situation. And so that is because I know them really, really well as people. I know how they respond to things that are traumatic, things that are funny, things that interest them. I know what to do to get them feeling curious about something. And I need to know all of this for my characters as well, particularly my main character, although I think it's really, really important that background characters have their own story and their own personality as well, because that kind of richness in detail is what's going to bring your story to life. Also, if you know your backstory characters well enough, sometimes they can just come along and push the plot into a direction that you totally didn't expect, but that actually really, really works for your story. Start off with your main character, okay? Who are they? What do they want? And that what do they want is the most important thing, because that's going to drive the conflict and stakes of your story. What do they want? What happens if they don't get it? And what is stopping them getting it? That gives you your motivation. It gives you your main inciting incident, because something's stopping them from getting what they want. It gives you all the conflict in your story, and it gives you all the stakes in the story. It also gives you some way towards working out who your antagonist is going to be. If you don't know what your character wants and what's going to stop them from getting that, you don't really much have a story. Again, we're back to sitting on the sofa scrolling through Twitter, because what else is your character going to do? They haven't got any conflict to drive them forward. After I've got my main character, I like to get their main relationship down. Now, this doesn't have to be a love interest. In fact, in a lot of stories, it isn't. It could be the partner at work that doesn't much like them, or it could be the best friend that is always there for them to talk through their problems with and get through the issue with. Now, you do want some personal conflict involved in that relationship, and ideally you want it to mirror the theme of your story. So, for example, in the one that I did before, my main character was a very young supernatural detective who was just coming out into the world of work, having passed her training. Her main relationship was with her partner at work, who, as a very experienced detective, didn't really feel like he should be babysitting my main character. And that kind of conflict really brought into the main themes of the story, which was about that character finding herself, finding the confidence in herself, and finding her way in that job, as well as being obviously about finding out who the serial killer is. Now, ideally, that character needs all of their own thoughts, feelings, emotions, hobbies, all of those sorts of things. And you will need to work those out, because that will help to push your plot forward as well. A lot of people don't really bother with their sub-characters or their supporting cast, but that's actually a really important way of making your characters feel really real and really relatable. Just like with your main character, you need to be asking yourself, what does this character want? What is stopping them from getting there? What are the stakes if they don't get what they want? What happens if they do get what they want? And you can play with all sorts of things there, like making your main ally become your main antagonist later on, or using that character to really drive personal development in your main character, which is going to give you that character arc that you need to make a successful novel. Now, you will also have a lot of minor relationships that your character needs to have. You know, it might be people that are only briefly mentioned, a spouse if the spouse isn't really involved, parents, flatmates, the local grocer so that they always have a little banter with, things like that. And they don't need as much sort of background detail as your main character, your main relationship and your antagonist, but having some of that idea of who they are and what they're about will again make your conversations more natural, and it will drive your plot forward. And that is what you're always looking to do. Every scene, every chapter needs to drive this story forward, either in your main plot or in your subplots, or at the very least in your character's personal development. Now, you might be super excited to get onto your antag now, but the next thing that I usually do is sort out my minor antagonists. This isn't your big bad. This isn't your big scary person that's going to actually ruin your character's life. These are the minor little people that get in the way along the way. The traffic warden that gives them a ticket when they're trying to go on a high-speed car chase. The boss that keeps picking on them, telling them that they need to be doing more. The spouse that's getting annoyed that they're spending all of this time at work when they should be at home with the family. All these little minor antagonists that sort of build your character up to the point where they are ready to handle that main antagonist. You need to work out motivations for all of those too. Important side note about these minor antagonists though, although they should be an irritant to your character, they should spur them to action, they should have all their own motivations as well, you mustn't let them take over the story. If you've done this right and you really know all of your characters, all of your side characters and all of your minor antagonists will be trying to be the main character in your story. And you mustn't let them do that. Don't let them take your character off on an irrelevant tangent that's not going to lead anywhere. That's where your planner will help you come in with that too. There are varying schools of thought on this, but when it comes to your main antagonist, I think that they need as much work into their character doing it beforehand as your main character. See, nothing annoys me more when I'm reading a book or watching a show or whatever than the bad guy is bad because he is bad. Nobody is bad because they're bad. People are bad because they think that they're being good, or they're bad because of something terrible that's happened to them that has reprogrammed the way that they look at the world, or they're bad because of factors external to them that they can't control. Nobody ever wakes up in the morning and goes, I'm going to be really bad today. That's not how people work. If you want your main antagonist to be actually scary and actually believable, then they need to be a real person. Just a cardboard cutout that's trying to steal the moon because they're a bad guy it's just not going to fall right with your readers. Don't insult them like that. Give them motivation. You don't have to make it a whole thing. You don't have to go really deeply into it and make this a likeable bad guy. You can leave them as a bad guy, but there has to be some internal logic for your character of why they are acting the way that they are. So now you've got your structure in place. You've got your main characters, main antagonists, and basically your main cast in place. You might not know loads about them. You might not know like what they had for breakfast this morning, but for most of them, you know what they want, what's stopping them getting it, what happens if they don't get it, what happens if they do get it. And from just that, you should have a vague idea by now of what is your main character arc going to be. It could be something as small as they were very, very shy and they found their confidence and now they can public speak. Or it can be something like, we'll go back to the Cinderella thing. At first, she's like a downtrodden slave or something, and she's longing for a better life. She's not actually doing anything for it. She goes through a period of growth and change where she meets people along the way that help turn her into a better version of herself, where she's brave enough to go to that ball, dance with that prince, and get her dream. Now, actually, that was a terrible example because Cinderella is one of the most passive princesses that ever existed. But without those different things happening to her, she doesn't get this arc where she becomes the princess. She starts off as unpaid servant. She ends off as princess, and in some versions of the story she ends that on really rubbing the stepmother and stepsister's noses in it by inviting them to the wedding and being incredibly gracious towards them. So it shows that she already has that gracious, unassuming, kind sort of aspect that she had in the beginning that has come with her, but now she's got the confidence, she's got agency, and she has been doing some stuff. I mean, I say she's got agency. She kind of does just sit around and wait for things to happen to her. I don't know why I went with Cinderella as an example. It's not the best one. So once I've got my characters and I've got my basic structure, this is where it starts to get fun, because I can start to change those post-it notes from things that just say inciting incident to things like main character's childhood home gets blown up, now it's personal, right? And so I will know that on November 6th, I'm going to be writing a 2,000 word scene about the main character's house getting blown up and that inspiring them into action to go and chase off my big bad. When we've got all those little things, like sometimes I might have a disjointed scene where I'm like, I don't know where this goes. I'm just going to stick it in different places on that board until it feels like it flows properly. And that's why I like to use post-its over making notes in notebooks, because then I can move them around as and when I need to. With my thriller mystery, I then got different coloured post-it notes. I used blue as my main ones for my structure and my things that had to happen. And then I used yellow post-it notes to show where the clues to the real killer were. And then I used pink post-it notes to show red herrings, that is, clues that point to the wrong killer, the wrong conclusion, to make it a little bit trickier for both my character and my readers to work out what's going to happen in advance. And then I also popped some green ones in there as well that were showing big parts of personal development for my characters. And by then it looks really, really messy, but I've got a few notes on each post-it that just tell me what's going to happen in that scene. And then once I've got all those post-its in place, I can work out roughly how many words I need for each scene and whether that adds up to a novel-length piece of writing. Now, once you've got your characters and everything in place, you've got your main structure in place, what I like to do, and some people do think this is cheating, you don't have to count it towards your daily word count if you don't want to, that's fine. But I like to craft my opening line because I am so intimidated by an empty page. And so I like to have my starting line ready so that I'm not just staring at a blinking cursor on November 1st going, once upon a time? I don't know. And so, yeah, craft your opening line in advance and then you haven't got a blank page to deal with. I usually do that on 31st of October at about 5 to midnight. I write out my opening line and then normally I end up doing a little bit of writing then and I write about 500 words and that's my start for NaNoWriMo. If you think that writing an opening line in advance is cheating, don't count it towards your word count and then you will still have written 50,000 words in November and the 4 that you wrote won't count. One of the very most important things about Preptober that I can possibly advise you is to clear the decks. And this will be useful even for the pantsters among you. Value your writing time. And to do that means you need to create some time for it in your usual busy life. I don't know, you've got a job, you've got kids, you've got elderly parents to look after, you've got a million things going on. You don't write daily now, right? That's why you're doing NaNoWriMo. And so to be able to create that habit, you need to create some space for it. So for me, I will be writing a list of things that I need to get done before November. That will include filling my freezer up with food that I have cooked that I can just chuck in the oven, let people help themselves to. So that during November, if I am not meeting my word count on time, I have got time in the evenings to do that, and I don't have to worry about cooking, washing up, all that sort of thing. So for that end, I'm going to make sure that I have stocked up on things like toilet roll, dishwasher tablets, milk, all the little daily things that you sometimes run out of and then have to take time out of your day to pop to the shops. I don't want to have to do that for the whole of November. I'm going to make sure that everything is stocked up. I'm going to make sure that the kids have got lunches that are ready for them to just grab and take, and so that I don't have to mess about with any prepping. I'm going to clean all the things that I usually clean when I'm procrastinating from writing, so that when it's time to sit down and write, I've got nothing to procrastinate with. I mean, some people might say that is the only time my house is clean. Those people would be right. But we don't worry about that in NaNoWriMo. Do not arrange to have guests over in November in NaNoWriMo. I know if you're in America that might be difficult because Thanksgiving, I don't know what to say about that. I wouldn't have somebody in my house in November because I want the cobwebs to gather and I want the dust to pile up and I want the laundry chair to be unobtainable because it's so covered in ironing, because those are not things that I'm prioritising this month. I can get a tidy house next month. I can get a tidy house the month before. Through NaNoWriMo, the most important thing to me is writing. And it's really important that you tell people that and that you let them know, because in the world that we live in, we're always constantly juggling things, right? And some of those things can be dropped and some of those things can't be dropped or they will break, right? And 9 times out of 10, our writing is one of those balls that can be dropped, because otherwise it's caring for somebody, it's looking after someone, it's taking care of our home, it's cooking all the dinners, all these sorts of things. What you need to do is for November, make it so that that is a ball that cannot be dropped. You cannot drop the writing ball. Other things, if it won't die if you neglect it, right? It'll still be there next month, okay? You will still be able to iron everything next month. It doesn't matter, okay? But your writing really does matter this month. This month you're taking part in a challenge that is really, really big actually, and you need to focus on that. NaNoWriMo does this by breaking things down into tiny little pieces, just the same as I do. 1,667 words, I think, is the aim to get 50,000 words a day. So if you write 1,667 words every single day, you will have a novel by the end of the month. And that sounds massive, but there are ways to break it down even smaller than that so that you can get this done no problem. So I was going to talk to you all about my actual NaNoWriMo process, like how I manage my time, because to some people 2,000 words a day is like, whoa, that is a lot. I don't know how I'm going to get that down on the page. That is okay. I have a method of breaking that down into tiny little pieces as well, because as you know, that's how I like to do things. But this video is going to be far, far, far too long. You're all going to get bored and wander off. And so I will do a separate video on that, probably near the beginning of November. If I remember to, I'll link that in the description of this one as well, so you can just watch them straight over if you're coming to it a bit late. I'll be back next Monday for my weekly vlog, and of course daily for my gratitude blog on the shorts. I hope you can join me for that. In the meantime, you have yourself a beautiful week.